Right, so welcome to the Tea History Collection, and today I have James Pogson, the owner of Northern Tea Merchants in Chesterfield. He's also a fellow board member of the Tea History Collection, so I see a lot of James now. Early days, funnily enough, when I retired as a tea broker in 2002, I was asked by the Tea Council if I would be a judge for um, the tea, I forget what they call it.
The Guild of Tea
The
Shops
Guild
at
of
the time,
the
wasn't
Guild of
it?
Tea
Yeah.
Shops, and we basically went round incognito to check out tea shops and then later London hotels. So I spent many years doing this. Anyway, my first one was to go and do the tea shops that they reckoned would be the awards of excellence for the year, and it meant going all over the country. But I went to Chesterfield to do James's. So, I think Linda came with me, so we looked like a couple just having
Yes, you're
tea.
undercover,
But of
yes.
course, I couldn't have any contact with James for obvious reasons. After that, when I went the next time, I think by then things had changed a bit, and James actually became a judge as well, and we discussed the whole thing. So, and we had a lot of fun. And then I met up with James again in China on my last trip to China, and I think was your first, James.
It was.
So, and that was a wonderful trip, and James really kept the party going. It was just a wonderful trip, wasn't it?
It
We
was. It was
really
a
made the
great
most
trip.
of it. And as I say, then when we set up the Tea History, the London Tea History Association, James came on board, as I said, and we've been firm friends ever since and seen a lot of each other. And James has given so much to the history collection and to the tea industry in general. So really, what I'm going to say is, James, where did it all start?
I'm going to say the 1st of April 1988, but it might have actually been middle of March. Actually, around about the time that our friend Ed Foster also started in the trade. He started in early 1988. I think maybe he started in April or May, but yes, we've been in the tea trade for the same length of time. So straight from school, straight into Northern Tea Merchants. And the first thing that my father always said to me, because you got to remember, Northern Tea Merchants is a three-generation business. So my grandfather, who entered into the tea trade in 1926, he worked for the Ceylon Tea Growers Association, and and he worked for them for about 10 years, and his final job title was that of superintendent. So I don't know whether you have to sort of click your heels, but being born in 1901, he was still very much, he had a very Victorian.
And there was quite a hierarchy in the tea trade in those
Oh,
days.
absolutely, there was. But after 10 years, he thought, I think I can do better at this myself. So he moved from Nottingham, which is where Ceylon Tea Growers were based, to Chesterfield, and opened a business called the Spire Tea Company. And he always sold tea that was a penny a pound or a penny, 1.5 pence a pound dearer than Thai Fu. And he said it was just that bit better because Thai Fu at the time, door-to-door delivery, Austin 7 van, bowler hat, plus fours,
It's incredible, wasn't it? Yes.
good morning, madam, I brought your tea. And tea was quite, delivered quite widely. That was part of the
Bob had their
service.
red vans.
Indeed.
Regions always and still
Well,
do
and still
today.
do, yeah, absolutely. And it is, I mean, we still deliver to, I think now all the customers of Grandpa's that we sort of retained through the years, sadly now passed away because it's getting a long time. But some people bought off us for 3 generations, and we now supplying their grandchildren,
loyalty.
people's grandchildren.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
It's great. Yes.
And tea does that.
Yeah.
And if we look at the branding and the way that tea has been marketed through the 1920s, 30s, and on to today, we really do see there's actually quite deep psychology in it, and people associate the colours of the brand very much with what they're doing, and people can make illogical decisions about the tea they drink, and God bless Yorkshire tea, but I always drink Yorkshire tea, and then overcoming that prejudice, because we've always been a manufacturer making tea bags very traditionally, using good quality teas and taking what Grandpa did. And when my father took over the business, it was still very much a leaf tea type thing. And my father's big thing was wholesale. So why would you deliver, £30 weight in half pounds of tea to 60 houses, when you could also then deliver to, on the next street, £30 weight of tea to a works canteen. So that was his first, sort of like way of growing the business. And he was buying tea at the time from a gentleman in Leicester, Mr. Worley. And Mr. Worley said, you really ought to start looking at the London auctions. And so the next sort of step that Northern Tea Merchants, my father as Northern Tea Merchants took, was to start buying tea from the auctions rather than buying it from someone who bought it from the auctions and, fingers in the pie, if you will. Yes. And it was great because in the days of the London auctions, so we're looking here during the 70s, when the auctions really were, some real tea was going through, and you were hammering it all.
Oh, absolutely.
Hammering it all.
Getting through 60,000 probably a week, and of course, going when I started in the tea trade, it was considerably more than that, and it was over 3 days. So yes, it's come down, and of course they don't exist anymore, sadly. But my God, when they were there, it was an extraordinary institution, and the fascinating people that were involved in it as well.
I was lucky enough to pay a visit at probably, I would have been about 16 years old during the school holidays when we came down, I think, to a tea council meeting. And we went to the auctions. I don't know whether it was an arranged thing. I think my father probably had a word because we were buying from Gow White, George
Yes,
White,
that's right, through the market man, that's right.
Yeah.
You had to buy, you couldn't just go into the auction and buy.
No.
You either bought through a buying broker or through the first-hand broker's chair, if
That's
you call
correct.
it, the market man, yeah.
So what we would do, we would get our George White and our Wilson Smithwick samples every week, and we pick through them, and it was great because we're not, even today, we're not a big business,
No,
but we sell good stuff, and we are in the luxury position from a tea tasting point of view of being able to say, I'll have that one. And then you try another 10. Oh, and I'll have that one. And ooh, this is fresh. And all this sort of things that you notice. And we were buying good quality East Drift KTDAs, decent Assams at the right time of year. My father would always sort of push it a little bit towards August for his June, July production, to time it while the quality was still there, but the price dropped slightly. Old tea sort of buyer's trick. And again,
good sensible buying. Yeah.
Well, and it was Dick Thomas, and then Ed took over.
He did indeed. Yeah.
And it has been Ed Foster ever since, and I still speak to Ed on a regular basis.
He's been a very good tea man, Edward. Yeah.
And all the way through to 1998 with the last tea auction, and we were pleased to be part of the last auction.
It was quite a day, right?
I would have loved to have been there.
Very emotional because I wouldn't say I was doing myself out of a job, but I'd grown up with the auctions, and of course, but we knew it would come to an end one day.
Absolutely.
And we did bow out gracefully, but it was sad, but that's life, and we accepted it. That was what it was going to be.
But tea rolled on, did it not?
Of course it has. Yeah.
And we are still drinking our 130 to 160 million cups of tea a day. 30 million, they say, is approximate out of home. A good 120, 130 million in home, first thing in the morning, whatever, or throughout the day.
It's still only water that beats it in terms of.
Absolutely, and in spite of all the stories.
Exactly.
that coffee is knocking tea, absolutely not. And it would have to grow an awful lot to do that. So some of the changes that I've seen, though, and really we're talking the modern history of tea. So, sort of 88 to, let's say, 2020, and sort of that.
Well, it's still only 30 years.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
If I listen to that, say that's a lifetime,
I'd like to say I've enjoyed every minute of it, but sometimes now things have changed in the field. So we've seen the onset. We mentioned this a little earlier about clonal teas. So from Assam, we've always. It's funny. I tasted a sample of. The estate will come to me in a minute, but that had been vacuum packed by Williamson.
I say they were the first to do it pretty well, weren't they?
In about 1983. And in 2015, I opened this tea and tried it side by side against one of the good samples that I'd bought for my blends that year. And the tea was markedly better
Interesting.
because it wasn't clonal. However, in the extremes of climate that the world experiences and has experienced, for some time, drought, flood, and,
Total extremes.
unpredictable, exactly. Those original tea bushes would not survive as well. And we would not have the tea for us, the tea for America, the tea for Russia, the tea for Germany, the tea for the world that we want. And we've also got a massively, massively growing internal consumption, particularly in India.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
So why would you export tea if you could sell it at a good price on the internal market?
China likewise, even more so, really.
Oh, quite right.
Very expensive if you buy it in China.
Yeah, and so what we found is that whilst we're still selling good stuff, and that is noticeably better, you try them side by one of our tea bags side by side against another, and you will be able to pick ours out, and I would say pretty much every time you'd be able to do that. But they're not as good as they were. Well, when I started tasting tea and it was coming in through the auctions, it seemed to be fresher.
It's interesting. Well, I can just say I think this is possible. So I mean, there's no way we can know, but it's all in there somewhere, isn't it? It's in the memory bank, and I certainly agree with you, which of course was the thing I was weaned on, Ceylon tea, because we were the biggest Ceylon brokers, and all the fine Euralias and the Uva season and all that.
That pronounced wintergreen.
They were incredible. Yeah. So you're right. That virtually doesn't exist anymore. It may do the odd occasion, but very rare. I mean, a number of buyers have said to me, good buyers said, all the Uva seasons and what it was.
No.
It's very difficult to find quality teas today, and that's a sadly. But that may be also to do with the way they produce it. If you're going for growth, like
our mutual friend Robert Wilson was
very
was very loquacious about that, wasn't he? Yes, and quite rightly so. Yeah, and even a Rotovane, anything but exactly. So yes, and then the other thing that I've seen through my period, and I think it's because of the way that my father ran the business and the customers that he had. We've seen the growth. We're going to touch on, I think, fair trade tea and on organic tea and the ethical standards. Now, we packed from the year I started big school, which was 1982. We packed for a couple of ethical companies. Oxfam was one of them, and a company called Tradecraft is another. Tradecraft doesn't exist today, unfortunately. But it really did, as a sort of someone coming into it. So I hadn't got really a fixed idea of how you do business in tea. It was all still quite new to me. To hear the ideas about, okay, well, what are the people who are picking the tea getting paid? Yeah. What's happening to it? Are things
taking off?
Well, are things fair? And then we can say fair to whom, can't we? Because it can go the other way too. But those sort of ideas whilst people had them, it tended to be through relationships that the tea trade looked after its kind, and through the Plantation Act, where the estates would provide housing if you followed the Indian model.
I mean, despite the criticisms over the years, and God, I remember a few, they were well looked after, I have to say. When
again, it's all relative, and we're going to say fair to who, aren't we? And where you start from and where you get to. Now, today, something else everybody has, and I was going to get it out of my pocket, but I've not got it with me because we're being filmed. I was going to wave my mobile phone about. Everybody's got a mobile phone, and the world has become a much smaller place. Because if you are friends on social media with somebody in Kenya, you can literally immediately correspond, share photographs, share opinions. And the world has shrunk since 2004/5 with the advent of social media's popularity.
And of course, it can be very dangerous because when they had all that trouble in Kenya with, we know what it was, with the plaquet and the rest of it, there were people actually saying we should boycott Kenya tea. Now,
that's correct.
One, we couldn't do it because 60% of all the tea we drink now comes.
Well, boycott Kenya tea. What's the alternative? Well, there isn't enough of that, so someone's going to have to go with that.
But those sort of things were being said then, long before social media. So imagine what it must be like today. It must be a minefield, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, we are. I'm not going to say attacked. We are observed as a trade on many sides. And also legislation has changed dramatically. And yet again, post-Brexit, if you want to send your tea into Europe now, you have to go in as a third country. We can't just ship it out. And it's called, there is now, I would say, more paperwork per cup done than there actually was. And to a degree, certainly on the financial side of it now, me and Ed have known each other for years. He knows I'm going to pay him.
Of course.
But the due diligence that he has to go through to underwrite the larger companies who have, different payment strategies, yeah, and the risk if someone goes bump of being left holding 900 tons of tea in the pipeline,
Frightening thought.
it really is these days, and it's. I'm sure you've had plenty of occasion through your life to lie awake at night and ponder what was going on.
Yes,
But I will say, I would humbly suggest that, these days one has more sleepless nights over new things.
I can quite believe it, James. I have to say, often I say, thank God I was heavily involved in the tea industry when I was, because I think today I would probably drive myself mad. Well, I wouldn't have the ability to do it. I mean, it is an age thing, I think. We went through a whole generational change. And our forebears
Yes.
again. I mean, when the auction, everybody in the auction had to have a silk top hat. I mean, you can go on forever, can't you?
Exactly.
But it's all changed. It's all changed.
It is.
And certainly, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I read a lot of this stuff. I'm a friend of the Ethical Tea Partnership. What they all have to go through. You're absolutely right.
Yes, it is interesting times. And then we also have new legislation being brought in the producer countries as well. Kenya with its Tea Act and setting a minimum price for tea.
Well,
And tea is
don't start me on that one.
yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, tea is not a commodity. Okay, there is a direct correlation between how nice tea tastes and how much it costs. You
Yes.
can't just say, oh, it's some black leaves, because there is a myriad of difference.
Right.
Which is why
Yeah.
in the supermarkets we see these, this vast variance in price, but there's a vast variance in quality
Of course there is.
as well. And there is tea that is enjoyable to drink, that makes you smack your lips and think, I'm going to have another cup of that. And there's other tea that is wet and warm and grey, and simply just fulfills a caffeine need.
Well, I don't know if you were there in 1999 when I was the chair of the tea trade dinner, my speech, which went down pretty well, but it was very much on that thing, on that theme. You've got to start paying for tea.
Yeah.
Because it's so cheap. And I'm afraid a lot of people in those are all going for these value brands, as they call them. They all had all sorts of crazy names, and it was awful. And you just think, well, we're encouraging people for the sake of a penny or two. It's all we're talking about.
Well, we ran it
to drink worse tea.
Do you remember when? I don't think you can these days now because of shipping routes, the cost of tea bag paper, the cost of packaging, the due diligence. But 29 pence for 80 tea bags. Now, no one's having any fun with that.
They can't, can it?
And at that level, you have to industrialize the production of the tea, and it has to be automated pick. There's no jobs for anybody.
That's where you say the quality, we know where that's going.
And the quality's through the floor, isn't it? And if it's all about 2 leaves and a bud. But if a machine's just going to take leaves, and it's not taking the immature ones, which how can you possibly manufacture something that does that?
Because it's a total science, isn't it? Tea culture, and
exactly.
You can't take shortcuts, really. But
and that is what has kept
the bottom line always seems to be so important, and I agree it's got to be, but it isn't at the cost of everything else. It shouldn't be.
Yeah, but knowing the truth behind it is what has kept me, and I know what has kept you. And being, I'm going to say, a tea person.
Yes.
Yes,
you
these days.
A lot of ladies.
Yes, exactly. Well, exactly. And you're going to be interviewing some, aren't you? We've got lovely Katie Tubb.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Looking forward to that.
And there are and truly, the chair of our UK Tea and Infusion Association, Sharon Hall, she is absolutely the best thing for the tea trade.
Yes, indeed.
Because she is, and very different to past, chairman, presidents, whatever, and her technical acumen is vast, and thank goodness it is.
Vital.
It is absolutely vital. Yeah. So this is sort of where we've come to, but the same arterial enjoyment of tea and love of tea runs through it. And not some mornings I don't jump out of bed, but most mornings I do, because I love my job.
Likewise, it always used to make me laugh that people used to say, "Oh, I hate getting up on Monday morning and going to work." I said, "Well, that's the best day of the week. That's the day we had our auctions." And the moment I woke up, I was always going through my head, "What a day it's going to be! Is the market going to be up? Is it going to be down? You know, who's going to be bidding?" So no, Monday for me was a great day. Good start to the week.
Indeed, indeed. I mean, when I first started, Monday for me was the Sheffield journey, because the first thing, after I'd done about a year's stint in the packing room, sticking labels on straight, making sure seams were right, learning the first learnings of how to tweak tea bag machines. And I mean, nowadays, if we take on an engineer, you're not going to pull someone off the street who knows how to fix a tea bag machine.
Sure.
So Muggins shows him. And Muggins shows him the difference between when you're cutting on the anvil, the 4 tea bags, the row of 4 tea bags that you make, a clang and a click.
Yes.
And a tea bag machine that is running correctly should sound like a Singer sewing machine in the next room.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's exactly what it should sound like.
When you see the first tea bag machine, particularly some of the big ones in the major packers, it's mind blowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you think, how the hell can they do that? I mean, who was the person that thought it up first? This is the thing. To get everything so at the end of the day you end up with a tea bag, not a pile of tea and a pile of paper.
And the tea timed at the right time. So the other this isn't hugely interesting, but the other thing is getting the tea into the tea bag at the right time. If you get it in a bit too late, or the tea is too light and it floats like snow into the bag that you're making, you get black marks in the seams. The tea bags come out.
Yeah.
And then we also have another change that's just happened very widely throughout the tea trade, with one notable exception, but I believe they are working on it very hard, is biodegradable tea bag paper. Unfortunately, the last manufacturer of tea bag paper in the UK, who were on the banks of Haywood, on the banks of a river up at Haywood near Rochdale, they sadly closed a couple of years ago. So now we buy our tea bag paper from Spain. The first time that we've ever
So there's
nobody making tea bag paper.
I didn't know that. Well, I knew they'd all been. Yeah. Crompton's was a big one, but there were a couple of others. But they've all been absorbed by other firms.
Well, we have companies like Ahlstrom,
yes,
Glattfelter,
right.
obviously German.
Yeah.
And great, good,
Yeah.
But again, finding a tea bag paper for my machines, which run at, and don't laugh, 600 a minute.
No, but don't go.
Compared to the 3,600 a minute that we're seeing these days, and possibly even more. I think up to they're possibly looking at doubling that to 7,200 a minute, which is the speed a car engine runs at when it's flying. The paper technology has to be such, and then we have to also make it biodegrade in a food waste stream.
It's a nightmare. That
and
it's got to be strong enough to do what it does.
But it's still
got to have quite a bit of inbuilt strength into it.
Still all about what's inside the tea bag.
Oh, of course it's. I couldn't agree more, James. Yes, it's just a vehicle, isn't it? That's all. No, you're right. It's the quality of the tea. And this is the other thing that's annoyed me over the years, and the fact that it's still mentioned today. It was mentioned in that Telegraph report, but the guy said, "Oh, tea dust is just sweepings." It's a total misnomer. We probably didn't help ourselves when the tea trade decided to call it a dust grade, because at the time they were talks about calling it fines or something else.
Yes.
The dust it was called, and everybody had it that they're just buying the cheapest sweepings off the floor. You put them right, and certainly as I have, I spent my time when I was doing all my wonders of tea talks for the progressives and the WI, saying anybody that says tea bags are rubbish because it's sweepings is absolutely, and as you said, it's a good quality leaf. It breaks down to different sizes, but it's a good quality leaf. So whether it's large leaf or small leaf, it's going to be good quality. Conversely, if it's an absolutely ghastly leaf, however leafy it looks, when you produce it, it's going to be bloody awful tea.
If I were to take a handful of, let's say, straight D, so straight dust, which has got still lots of tiny fibres in it from the capillary vessels in the leaf, and go like that, we'd have covering all over this counter. You could write your name in it. If I took half an ounce of good quality Pecco dust and go like that, you'd hear it land on the counter. And it's that density and the fact that if it is clean black leaf, it is that when you leave your spoon on your tea bag while you're still in your dressing gown first thing in the morning, standing in the kitchen, and you see the tea coming out into the hot water. It is the dust that is working and making that happen. And one could argue that the tea bag saved the UK.
I've always said that, exactly what I said, because instant coffee was in then,
Yeah,
and it was so convenient to make a cup of instant coffee. And if we couldn't come up with something pretty well as easy, people weren't going to go on making it into teapots, tea strains. Although, fun enough, that seems to be coming back. I saw.
well, I'm very glad it is, and
Yeah.
thanks to the work of you and and me as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
When we were judging for the Tea
Yeah.
Guild and
We
looking
pushed it.
all that sort of thing. But the fact that you could actually have a decent cup of tea on Paddington Station
right.
on the platform,
Yeah.
with a tea bag,
Yeah.
did mean that
course it
tea was able to hit back
Absolutely.
at the convenience of instant
Yeah.
coffee. I mean, really, that came in sort of World War II, didn't it?
Yes.
Instant coffee,
Yes.
powdered, spray dried,
That's right. Yeah.
pretty, average.
But
stuff.
camp, and then there was camp coffee, of
And-
course,
and-
which
and
we
the-
all lived on. The
yeah.
essence thing was that. We didn't know anything else, so you
No.
just accepted it.
No.
Of course,
And milky sweet coffee was very much the British taste, though. I mean, I know it may not have been to you personally, but how many people went to Littlewoods Cafe with their gran and had and watched a drink, milky sweet tea, milky sweet coffee, sorry, that sort of thing. And coffee was. I remember my grandfather on his business cards. It was sort of Spire Tea Company, purveyors of fine quality teas, and then on the back, why not drink coffee when you entertain? Scientifically vacuum packed by the vacuum-vita process in tins. These were that my grandpa had done. I mean, we started roasting in 1968, but coffee's different to tea. I always say,
Totally. All right.
coffee probably pays my mortgage, but if you cut me, I will bleed tea.
No, it's true, isn't it? Yeah. But you're right. I mean, and then of course all the years that they said, oh, of course, coffee's our biggest competitor. It wasn't. It's all these soft drinks. It's Coca-Cola and all the other things
at the time.
with the young. Yes.
Yes.
Although I think again that's probably nothing stays the same forever, does it? It changes.
I don't know if you remember the advert that was done in the late 80s by the tea council. Do you remember? And it was the chemical plant, and it was sort of wandering around following. And here we are. We have our 1-calorie drink, and then someone says, "Oh well, why don't you have a cup of tea? It's 1 calorie less than 1 calorie."
That's right.
And
then all those lovely ones that after they had the party, they sat down and had their cup of tea before they went to bed. They said, "Tea, the best drink of the day." They were very clever advertising.
They were.
Incredible. I mean, it's a shame it all finished, but then the big boys wouldn't support it and needed it. So that was
it's better for a tea company to market in their own style.
That's this is what they've always said. Yeah.
And the UK TIA as it is now is, whilst we very, very, very strongly advocate tea, the consumption of tea in general.
Quite.
Yeah. We can't, obviously we wouldn't say, oh, drink this, drink that.
No, exactly. Well, there's a place for that as well, I think. But of course, they all want to do their own thing.
Let people make their own decision and follow just as they always have. We can wind the clock back 100 years to 1925. Let's have a look. Follow the branding, strong branding, big, well-known names, like say Taifu, which is Chinese for doctor.
That's right.
Yeah, being at the time one of the biggest brands, and again we have Maserati tea.
It's so sad that Taifu, where they've ended up.
It is. I sincerely hope the brand survives the financial bumps that it has had over the last, I'm going to say, 5 years.
Yes, it's a bit older. Yes, probably even prior to that, James. I think.
Yes, yeah.
Struggling. They were always number 3 in the auctions. It was obvious they were always number 3, and so Brook Bond and Tetley's just ran riot. And they very rarely came out. Dear old Tony Harrison, who wasn't the greatest tea buyer, he loved antiques. That was his great thing. But he was the buyer, so he had to sit in the auction and buy the tea. And I reckon that 2 things happened. Either he went home with less tea than he should have had, or he got it and had to pay a lot more. And Jimmy Hilditch, who was buying, well, he did buy it, but of course by then he'd gone on high, always said, it's extraordinary. People say we want to get tea as cheap as we can. It's absolutely wrong. What we want to do is make the other guy pay more.
Yes.
And that was the art of a good buyer.
Yes, exactly.
Because if you had the
getting
power,
what you needed,
if you had the power of Brook Bond and Tetley, you could run Taifu around. And I always thought, I felt so sorry for Tony, but I always thought then Taifu was struggling. And they were the first to go into own label, which again you could say was possibly the kiss of death.
Well, they dropped it all. didn't they? 3 years ago, completely shut it down. DMT went, the whole thing. It was, yeah, a real change, a sea change. But the reason they dropped it, because there's no profit in it. Now, again, let's look at what's fair. Okay, tea cost. So for instance, they used to pack, I think, Budgeon's round green tea packs. So that green tea, this I'm going to say over the last 10 years. So it's only a couple of years ago that Thai food stopped doing that. But that green tea will still have to come in from China. It'll have to have passed at least 255 different tests. Possibly more, but it was 255 originally, and then it got more and more and more, to make sure that it was that the maximum residual levels of all the pesticides that could be in there or the fertilizers were complied with. Yeah, it would have then had to have been made into tea bags, packaged at high speed, and sold. And this is part of the problem. So those tea bags were selling £1.20.
Yeah.
And there was no one's going to get a drink out of that.
No.
All the way through
It
this.
was just that fashion. People got the idea that, well, there's two things. One, they said green tea is healthier than black tea, which is not true.
No,
But it's that the Chinese and the Japanese had done the research over years and years, and it takes a long time to seep into the public recognition.
It does.
So
I was always told,
work on the black tea in the 80s and 90s. People were convinced that green tea was more healthy.
yes.
Very difficult to shift.
Well, I was always told when the Royal Society of Chemistry released their results, they did green tea first and released the results. And it was quiet in the papers when they released it, so it got to about page 3. Yeah. And then, so a couple of years later, when they released the research they'd done on black tea, we were invading somewhere or someone was invading someone else. And so it ended up on about page 37.
Yes.
And everyone sort of thought, oh, well, black tea can't be as good as green tea. It's just the same.
Because it is same
And,
work.
and there are different
processes.
Well, there are different processes, but there are different benefits to the two.
course there are.
And,
Yes,
and I if you had to sort of say, well, how much different is green tea than black tea?
Yeah.
It's
It's
not that much,
so
isn't it?
little to make. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But what's interesting is I've got a garage full of green tea. The number of times I've been given green tea bags from anybody you can think of, and they're all bloody awful, to be honest, the only way I can say it.
There's
Because
green tea and green
having
tea.
like you experienced what proper Chinese tea is like,
Yes.
how you could ever drink that. But
So
again,
let's have a
people
look
because
at the
they think
difference
it's
in
healthy.
price. If you are in China and you want to buy good quality green tea, you will pay for it.
Right.
It will come in a beautiful box
Yeah.
that just about opens itself and brews itself.
Yeah.
Fantastic quality. But you will pay for it.
Yeah.
And because of the excellent efforts of the British Merchant Navy, through the war, bringing tea in, we never ran out in our darkest hours.
It's incredible, really.
And even though we were sort of, was it 0.8 of an ounce? I think that was
Something the ration.
what was a
pretty small.
tea.
Yeah.
But we never ran out. And
Yeah.
obviously during the war, I'm guessing rebrewing was pretty much doing
Sure
it.
it was, yeah.
But we got it into our heads. Tea's always available. We never even run out. And so
It's been taken for granted, rather.
I believe that's
Yeah.
happened. It is now in renaissance, and I think let's have a look at how social media has helped us. We've been able to, as small companies, evangelize about the quality of our tea. We've been able, and the data that I can find out about the teas that I buy now is significantly more than I could have done in 1988 when I first came into the trade. We'd have known the tea was right. We'd have tasted a sample of it. But I can, there's almost a dossier.
Yes.
You can prepare now
Mind-boggling, really.
with everything from technical to ethical to geographical information. And then you can put copying notes on top of that. And the good thing about all that extra information is it is actually adding value to tea.
Yes, and making people think about it.
It is.
What is involved.
It is.
Because I think this is the trouble. All the talks I gave, so many people said, "Oh, I never really thought about it before. I just have a tea bag, I put it in." And when you've explained to them what is involved, they really are incredibly impressed.
Yeah.
And so they should be. As I was the first time I went round a tea factory, I couldn't believe it. It was
If I
just incredible. The
let's say-
skill that was needed
Yeah.
to produce that tea.
But let's say we didn't know each other. I'll say, Mike, I'm going to give you 80 drinks. I'm going to charge you £3.20 for that. And that's a bit toppy. Yeah. You wouldn't believe,
Yeah.
there you go, there's 8 tea bags straight out the supermarket. and they are this.
I know.
And not only that, and partly due to activism and partly due to change in regulations, something called corporate sustainable responsibility, has basically meant that now, as a consumer, you can even have access to the teas that have gone into, or or all the estates that the tea company of your choice bought.
This is the thing, isn't it? Because also, of course, 20 plus different tea estates in any one tea bag, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, unless they're mine.
Oh no, well then that's single. Then you go to single estate,
Yeah,
and that's
but
the great thing. I find single estate fascinating.
The most complex blend we do is 4 teas. We don't
No,
need to do that because we're so small.
You know what you're doing. You've got the control. No,
And we bought good stuff.
Yeah.
Although I will say, my father used to keep any of the really top quality samples that came through every week from the auctions. And he tipped them into a tea caddy. So all the Rwandas, the Easter of Kenyans, and any, sort of stand out of samples, and they all go into this tea caddy.
So that was,
and he sort of filled this tea caddy up with it, and then dry. No, but it never tasted right. This is the thing, you can't just mix good stuff together and get something that tastes right. You've got to get your proportions.
They worked out very carefully.
Absolutely
right, James. Yeah.
And it is that art, and the art of people who are buying tea for brands where they have to buy every day, otherwise they'll run out of tea. And then you've got to think of the extra 5 weeks because of because of the Houthis or because of the Somali pirates who are now filling the gaps that the Houthis have left.
Just in time is just almost a thing of the
past. Oh, it blooming is. I mean, that 5 week stretch on the longer voyage times. We had enough in the UK to cover us. But a good job it wasn't 8 weeks.
That's true, right?
Isn't it?
Absolutely, James. Yeah.
And so and for actually people to think, God, this has all gone through that, and it's 320 for 80 tea bags.
I know, you're right.
That's, to me, that's a bit of a crime. And while ever, don't get me wrong, I'd love to see tea bags at £10 for 80 or £5 for 80. I believe tea should be accessible. I just think that we in this country, particularly, probably out of anybody in our immediate environs, our geographical neighbours, we probably take tea more for granted, I think, than say the Germans do.
Oh, I think. Well, of course, yes, that part of Germany drinks tea because, of course, everyone said the Germans drink tea, but Westphalia and that area do.
Yes,
the rest is all coffee. But no, they've always taken it seriously, and of course, one of the reasons is that their tax arrangement, isn't it? Because they get import tax or they get taxed on weight of tea rather than quality, don't they?
Yes.
So they've always kept good quality tea. Now they're going to be penalised.
Yes, exactly.
And so it's in the psyche now, and they all do. And I know when I was working when I left Wilson Smithett and Thornton Mason asked me to go and do a bit of work for them, all the good teas all came from Germany.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when fair trade first came in, if you looked at the lists of teas that were available on there were a few odd bits and bobs, and then about 8 or 9 Darjeeling estates. And they were all, and the Germans were very much buying the Darjeeling. And it took some real lobbying and pushing. And then KTDA East Rift Estates came on.
Yeah.
And we saw the advent of companies like, I'm going to say, Mark Wadd Flipper. Yeah, when Mr. Breen had it. And was it Michael Breen?
I think,
and Barbara, his wife.
Yes.
And they and the KTDA put Kiegoi and I believe Kinoro and 1 or 2. I think there were 6 to start with. And all of a sudden, we could buy tea that was as good as anything that was out there, quality-wise.
Because they didn't really have a season in Kenya. So it's slightly rainy seasons and slightly cooler in July. But the quality maintained very well over the year, didn't it?
I was told if God was on your side, you could, if you were lucky enough, you could get 8 harvests in some years. That's pushing it a bit. Possibly 6.
They pluck a bush every 15 days, don't they?
Yeah, so and again, but you always hear that, whenever you visit an agricultural producer, they always tell you how fecund the ground is. How many times have you heard, oh, well, if you leave a nail on the ground, you'll have an iron tower in the morning. That sort of thing. Try it with a pound coin.
Yeah. Well, they used to say in Uganda, they said it's so fertile, if you put a stick in to hold up a plant, the stick would grow. And it pretty well was right. It was incredible, that fertile. So there we go. And yes, Africa's been a tremendous boon to us here, as far as tea is concerned, hasn't it?
What do you reckon the percentage of across the board? How much of the brands?
Hmm.
Do you reckon that the average sort of blend percentage of Kenya, whether it's West or East Rift, is about 40%?
Yeah,
Do you
it's
reckon
got to be
that
at
much?
least
Maybe
40%,
more?
I would
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
James. When I started in the tea trade, as I said to you earlier, 40% of all our tea came from India, 40% came from Ceylon,
Mm.
and the other 20%, well, Kenya and all sorts of little places, you know, Malaysia we used to get, Mauritius, all sorts of places.
Because you
But
worked with the tea board, the Sri Lankan tea board, didn't you, until fairly recently?
yes, I was their honorary tea ambassador until 21.
And I mean, Ceylon tea is lovely. We have
Yes.
a romantic
Yes,
connection
I
with
know.
Ceylon.
We do,
Sri Lanka.
yeah, yeah.
But what do you, so 40% plus Kenya, let's say 35% Assam.
And 1% Sri Lanka.
Well, exactly.
And they're struggling at 1%, and it's just the speciality teas, basically. Those good quality teas that still exist, sold in all these
Came
speciality
out
teas.
some really nice Ceylon CTCs and a couple of, Goravilla and just some nice
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But it is so pricey compared to the others that we put it into it goes into our classic blend at about 15%, which is toppy.
Yes, I would think
These days it's you wouldn't see many people commercial suicide sort of to do it, but we do charge accordingly
and you should
for
do.
the tea that's got for the blends that have got it in.
What is so sad
People
is,
do still like that flavour.
oh, I know, but what is so sad is Colombo tea auctions, prices in Colombo are higher than any other auction in the world.
They are.
Very high price for the low grains, which you all know will go to the Middle East and Russia, and they're prepared to, but again, they're prepared to pay for it. We never have been, have we? I don't know why. And again, it's something, in fact, it's always been there and it's always been available.
Exactly.
Somehow it's in,
Exactly. We've sort of had this.
we're hardwired to.
The psychology of it's
value
quite
for
interesting. Yes, exactly, exactly. And we've got the quest for value for money is completely cross-party and throughout, etched into the British psyche, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And also I think that the word penny wise and pound foolish should perhaps also be etched in there
I
sometimes.
think you're right, James. Yeah.
But no, I mean, my 30, so 88, 2025, my 37 years in the trade have been hugely enjoyable, but they have been incredibly diverse.
Oh, but yes, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I said because I'd been chairman of the United Kingdom Tea Association, I was given a farewell lunch at the Oriental, which was lovely. And I said to them, I've never looked upon this as a job. It's just been a way of life. And the
Vocation.
people I've met over the years, the fun I've had out of it, I've enjoyed every minute of it. I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah.
I
don't think I was, if I could, sort of wave a magic wand and say waft away 10% of the paperwork, it'd be nice. But otherwise,
yes, it's all something, but you have to take the whole thing as it is.
exactly. No, I still
Yeah,
love very much what I do, and I'm planning on doing it for another 20 years.
Keep at it. But I'm going to keep involved in tea until I drop.
Yeah.
And it's the only way.
I think I'll end up doing
And
it.
with drinking tea and being involved in tea, the chances are I should drop much later than I might
Quite
otherwise
right.
have done.
Right.
Anyway, James, it's been an absolute delight talking to you. It really has, and I think we've had enjoyment out of that, and I hope when people watch it, they will as well.
Well, thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
James.
Thank you.